I don't think there's better words to describe how I feel after watching these 2 new episodes except it's great to be back. Like, there's no other way I can put it. And what I mean by that is back in Atlanta, like, I felt as though season 3's approach was kind of a little bit too experimental. I mean, I appreciated it and what it was, but it always felt like something was missing, and I don't want to attribute it because of the setting change, but I don't know, I think I'm kind of leaning towards that. Like, for instance, the first episode of our final season was very odd. Like, it took me a while to understand, but it's that strange atmosphere that I very much miss, and reminded me of peak Atlanta. Like, having our characters navigate through the weirdness of it was just what I was accustomed to, and perhaps that's just what it is. Again, season 3 is not bad, but I always felt like something was missing there. Like, I can't be the only one feeling nostalgic watching these 2 new episodes, and so I'm kind of leaning on the impression that the rest of the series is going to be leading with the whole surreal aspect of the show by tenfold. Like, just based on the little bits and pieces that we got from the trailer, there was some pretty odd stuff there. It was almost like some of the characters were trapped in this purgatory that they're trying to get out of, and it will be very interesting to see the context of that. Like, is this a place? Is this some different realm? Like, for example, when Ern and Vanessa came out of that door and they met up with Paperboy when he was following the ghost of Blue Blood, I was like, yo, where did these guys come from? This is like a whole different plane of existence. So I'm very curious if, kind of based on the trailer and what we've seen in the first episode, if we're going to see more of whatever that was. But yeah, that first episode I thought was pretty funny, and I thought it was interesting that they decided, like, the writers wanted to like include some things that happened during 2020 protests like summers ago with the extinguished lady, and like have her follow Darius around with a knife just trying to get that air fryer that he supposedly stole. And I don't know if you're aware of this, but Donald has mentioned in previous or maybe several interviews that the writers like to come up with just some pretty outlandish things and turn it into something funny, or at least through the lens of Atlanta. Like, I feel like the average person would think this is funny, like, despite like the overarching context of where it came from. And something else that I thought was pretty interesting to note is that I felt as though the characters were kind of revealing their attitude towards Atlanta, and it wasn't a good one necessarily. And this more so applies to the scenes involving Ern and Vanessa when they were trying to escape Atlantic Station. Like, they were running into a lot of familiar faces who they may have known or dated or etc. I was like under the impression, like, are the characters just readjusting? Like, I don't know if you've ever lived in a small city before, but having run into the same few faces all the time may make you feel like a little trapped or claustrophobic. And having the characters go from like there to like across the country, because of Paperboy or Alfred's tour, it's like having to come back. Are they just readjusting, or again, just something that I'm just looking too deeply into? I don't know. What do you think? Now, when it comes to episode 2, oh man, Ern is one sick bastard. Like, I was really under the impression like this whole therapy session was totally unrelated to the subplot, at least in my initial watch. I mean, the end of the episode blatantly says that he's behind it all, but like, I wasn't quite understanding. I think the first watch I was just enjoying the show for what it was and not looking too deeply, just enjoying myself. And then the third time I plus replay, I was like, okay, everything makes sense. It makes sense why her life is hitting the sewers. Was it warranted? Perhaps. She just crossed the wrong person, and it just so happened to be Ern Marks. And like, you know what? It is what it is. I kind of just hope that it doesn't like lead into further things being done. I mean, Ern does joke at the end with Tracy, which was a surprise to see, that he'll do it to him too. And we have everything on record of all the times that they've bumped heads, Tracy and Ern, and like, maybe he would do it. You never know. What Ern committed in this episode was basically nefarious. Like, that's gotta be illegal. And I don't know if you're familiar with any of the Donald Glover interviews, but Donald has never been afraid to admit that he can be petty.
I am naturally like petty.
Petty?
Like, extremely petty. Like, Awaken My Love was literally because somebody was like, oh, he can't make a hit.
Oh,
and I was
shit.
like, oh, not only will I make a hit, I won't make a video for it.
Pettiness has its place.
It makes you stronger.
Say.
But I also know it's like, it's dark. It's
But-
not something that you should be, it's not something that it should be all of that, because then it's bad.
And so I'm just hoping, at least for the character of Ern, that it doesn't like go down an even further destructive path. I'm just hoping that this is just a one and done thing. Even like Alfred and Darius are like, what you did was kind of like, you're doing a lot. You're moving mad. but she did almost fully jeopardize Ern's traveling due to her own prejudice, which I thought to be very ironic considering the opening scene when she was ogling at her black neighbor. I was like, alright bro, this is getting weird around here, it's getting weird. And yet the last thing that actually took me by surprise 100 times over was the whole conversation about what happened with Ern at Princeton, because throughout the series we got light mentions here and there, but nothing too concrete. It was always vague and quite ambiguous, and in hindsight I can definitely see why. Ern was just a victim of a really bad circumstance, because in what world would it be even appropriate to bring this up? Like, I even think if the therapist had been white, it would have never been discussed, and I totally understand that. And so I'm really glad that the Atlanta writers found some way to resurface this. And while I was watching it, it reminded me of the original pilot that I had read, which it starts off with Ern talking to the dean about the RA's accusations against him and how really bad the situation is, and that's just how the show starts. Very different from what we got in season 1, but I think there might have never been a better time to do that, because we've been with this character since 2016, or rather season 1, and seen how he interacts with the world. It makes him an even more complex character. Like, it explains his moments of distrust towards people, his skepticism, his spite, and his drive to avoid ever getting the short end of the stick. Like, it all makes sense. It's crazy that we're getting this kind of character development. I mean, it is the final season, it's fitting, and so I only expect the other characters to get the same treatment. So that's all the thoughts that I have on episode 1 and 2 of this final season of Atlanta. It sucks to see that in a couple of weeks that will be it, but there's nothing we can do about it, and I think if this ends off on a good note, that I'll be very content, and I think that's all that matters. Just enjoy the ride, that's it. Anyways, take care of yourself, and I'll see you guys in the next one.